Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. We are here once again. This is Guys on Sports. Following a pretty eventful day concerning Mr. Stefan Diggs. We're here to kind of talk through that a little bit today, and we're going to get through our series here, which is going to reach division, kind of breaking down who we think is going to be the MVP, fantasy wise for that division. I think we're hitting AFC North, right? Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's next on the docket.
All right, AFC North's next on the docket. So we'll get into that. We'll talk some Stephon Diggs, what it means for the Bills, what it means for the Texans, fantasy implications. But before we get into that, just wanted to swing it to you guys and see how everything's going.
You know, my dad used to have a saying, sometimes you're the hammer and sometimes you're the nail. And this week I've been quite a bit. It's been a crazy week, busy, absolutely overwhelmed a little bit, but I think it's kind of like everybody, right? Everybody's got their issues.
Yeah, picked up a new hobby this morning. Disc golfing. It's all the rage. I think all the youngsters, all the hipsters are doing it.
Yes, that's
Hipsters.
exactly good. I don't think, Phil, do you think there's any hobby that screams I am right more than disc golf? It's like an elevated, like even more than golf. Disc golf says it screams. I'm an
Why? Disc golf is for everybody. The discs are relatively inexpensive, and the game itself is free. I think you could help keep a lot of kids off the streets. Personally,
Streets of
I think we need
Claremont.
to. I think we need to keep. I think we need to bring disc golf into the inner cities. Put disc cages on every corner,
Wow.
and you know,
You know what Mark's saying? Take down the basketball hoops and put up disc golf. It's listen. This is sounding a lot more like white privilege. I'm just saying. Oh man. So
well, we could multi-purpose the basketball hoops. We could turn them into the disc cages.
there you go.
Problem solved. I like the way you think, Rocky.
There you go.
You're light on your feet when it comes to that.
Yeah. Oh man.
What were you going to say, Rock? I heard you about to ask a question. Go for it.
I was going to ask you how your week was. How are you
My
doing?
week,
I
my
care.
week so far has been fine. It's been eventful. It's been full of joy, full of pain. I've cried, I laughed, I've wept,
Really?
also crying. I've uh I've laughed, I've eaten, I've thrown up.
So
It's been a full
why have you
what?
thought
Probably because I ate too much. Yeah,
It's
but
a new diet. He's
it's
trying.
been a good week. I'm ready. I'm ready to hit it, man. I do. Before we get into anything, I do want to mention our partners, Chalkboard. If you're looking for a place to go talk fantasy, get some fantasy advice, maybe talk to Mark about who you should start and sit, maybe check out Rocky's cheat sheets, maybe get some picks from the big guy over here, or maybe get some team ratings from Zach. Perfect place for that is Chalkboard. You can find it in the link of all our bios, anywhere you see us on socials, or just go to the App Store, search up Chalkboard. Super intuitive app. Not only to get in touch with us and kind of be on our message board. We have over 300 members, or close to 300 members now. So there's a nice back and forth with even some of the other members. You get input on your teams, but it's also just a great app in general for people that love sports. And if you're following scores, you're making bets or whatever you're doing, it's just a really, really awesome platform.
Yeah, and I'd like to add if you already don't have an app that wakes you up in the middle of the night with up to the minute sports coverage, get Chalkboard because it's sure to do it.
All right. So with that being said, I say we move right on in, unless you guys have a protest, to our first subject at hand, and let's just dig right into this Stefan Diggs business. I want to start with that. I want to start by saying, we were on it early, uh, even when a lot of people were talking about it, but I think a lot of people thought that he would stay in Buffalo. I think we may have been split, but we have been talking about it for quite a while. Diggs gets dealt to the Texans. I think it's great football wise for them. What do we think it means for CJ Stroud? What does it mean for Stephon Diggs? And what does it mean for that wide receiving core in Houston?
I think from a fantasy standpoint, I think Stroud, who was already one of the early quarterbacks taken off the board, I think he hops up even a couple more spots now because on top of, Nico Collins and Tank Dell put in amazing seasons last year. But again, you don't really know what you're getting with them because they've both been a little injury prone in the past. You bring in a bona fide stud number one like Stephon Diggs. They brought Joe Mixon into town. Dalton Schultz is a very reliable tight end. I think Stroud's market just went. I think his ADP just hopped up a couple rounds. I was joking around the other night that, Lamar was saying he was going to throw for 6K last year. I think it might be a possibility with Stroud. Stroud might throw for 6K and like 50 tutties. It's crazy.
50?
Crazy to think, man. I don't know. He's got a shitload of weapons, dude, and he looks great.
I think their entire offense, we're forgetting that they also brought Joe Mixon over in a trade. Joe Mixon, say what you want. I consider him average Joe. He's not a great running back, but as far as volume, he gets it. And he's a great receiver out of the backfield, better than any running back that Stroud had last year. So I feel like Stroud is set up to just be a monster. But I also think it benefits Diggs because Diggs, has he ever had a number two receiver as good as what he's about to have in Houston? Take your pick. We're not sure which one will be the clear number two, but I don't know that he never had that at Buffalo. And did he ever have that in Minnesota?
I think he had Thielen, right, for a couple seasons.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fair. He did, but I think that Tank and one get another guy.
I think moving Tank to slot is going to be absolutely fucking lethal. Honestly, I love all parties involved.
I am not. I love Stroud. I don't think I'm ready to go 50 touchdowns, 6,000 yards. I do think there'd be growing pains. It'd be interesting to see how Stroud reacts to a personality like Stephon Diggs and the baggage that comes along with him. Are you going to find early in the season or maybe in certain games where he's kind of eyeing down or forcing the ball to Diggs? I don't know. I don't see that from Stroud, but, he was also playing with a few very young receivers in his rookie year. So we haven't seen that dynamic yet and how that's going to play out. I feel like with Stephon Diggs, he did have Thielen. I think when he was in Minnesota, though, he was wide receiver too, and really wasn't a wide receiver one to like maybe that last season in Minnesota, and then it really catapulted him to what he was going to do in Buffalo.
The catch set him off.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that what you got to wonder is there something else that we're seeing? Oh, wait, you finishing a comment? Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Go for it.
No, please.
No, I forgot what I was saying.
Well, then that
I think you saved him.
Yeah. One thing I will say, I was looking at his stats from last season in Buffalo. He had some great games. There's no denying it. And anytime you finish with over 100 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns, calling it a bad season would be appropriate, but it was one of Diggs' worst seasons. And if you look at how he finished, he had 6 games sub 48, and 4 of them came in the back part of the season, including the playoffs. So Buffalo may legitimately feel like he wasn't worth it going forward, and get a second round pick right now, it would be the best that they could ever get for him. So it's going to be interesting to see if Diggs is on the decline. It does say something to me that Buffalo would rather pay $3 million more to unload him than to keep him on a team.
Yeah, I just think where there was smoke, there was fire. I know, Phil, you were saying you're worried about how he works in. I don't know, honestly, that any of that situation, from what I heard, what I read, that situation in Buffalo, I don't really know that that was his fault, man. I think, if anything, I think I think he had a pretty solid character. And where the first smoke came from was when he was upset at Josh Allen a couple seasons ago, headed to the playoffs, and he decided to kind of, his head wasn't totally in the game. That was when he got caught, you know, out and about, behind the wife's back. And I think Diggs kind of took that personally, because Diggs is a competitor and wants to win and didn't want any of that extra funny business. So I think if that's the story and if that holds water, like, you want character like that coming in, especially as a veteran and a proven veteran like Diggs, to come in for a young offense like that. And I think, he never seemed to be one to cry for the ball until that riff happened. And then, because he knew that there was clear separation, right, in that relationship that he had with Allen. So at that point, he felt like he was maybe being not fairly integrated into the offense. And I get it for a competitor like that. So, I mean, if that's his baseline, if that's baseline Diggs, I think he's going to bring a ton of upside to that Houston offense.
Well, I hear a lot of speculation there, which is fair. I mean, you can speculate, but I don't necessarily applaud him for his moral character or whatever the case may be. I'm not really concerned with that. I'm not concerned with that if I'm the front office for the Buffalo Bills. He's a professional. He's being paid. He needs to perform. I don't care how he feels about his best friend stepping out on his wife. And if he is sandbagging last year like Rocky thought he was, that's also a bad sign. But I don't know. All speculation. But I do know he's 31 years old. The team where he made his name was ready to pay to get rid of him, to get a second round pick that they're probably going to turn around and turn into another receiver, is what I'm expecting. And they're ready to move forward with Josh Allen. But I think the real question, and I'm just going to put it to you guys, we'll run through them real quick, because there's a few guys we have to kind of make an assumption about or prediction about here. Let's start with we already started, I guess, with Stroud. We got 50 touchdowns, 6,000 yards for Mark. So I guess for you, he's possibly QB1 this year. Mark, Rocky, what do you say?
I believe in Stroud, not only because he came out of the Ohio State, but that's definitely part of it. He doesn't seem to be a typical rookie. He wasn't shook. He played his best games in the big games. 6,050 yards or 50 touchdowns. That's awful. It's an awful lot. But I could see him hitting 5,000, maybe 5,100 yards, and definitely going over 40 touchdowns. I just think he has too much firepower not to.
Let me ask you something, Rocky. The mic. Are you using a microphone on your laptop?
Yeah.
Is there anything covering it or near it?
No.
Okay, just making sure.
Does it sound bad?
It was coming in and out just a little bit. Okay. So I say next, let's go to the big guy, Diggs. Do we think this is an upgrade or a downgrade for Diggs? Anybody?
I think
I was going to see how long we could keep that going.
I think that Diggs, Phil, I think you said it really well. Either he was sandbagging or his skills are diminishing. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he wanted off that team. And so he was disinterested in the game, in the team. So I think he will have an increase in touchdowns from what he had last year, even if he doesn't have quite as many receptions.
Mark?
I think from the fantasy standpoint, I think Diggs' ADP was a little high last year already. And I think where he should have gone last year is probably where he'll go this year, and it'll be warranted. move into a team where you do have, bona fide wide receiver 2, bona fide wide receiver 3, like Rocky pointed out, he's never had a situation really like that with Josh Allen. So if we're comparing Stroud to Allen, I mean, Stroud's only got a year under his belly. That's a tough comparison to make. But in an offense that was moving the ball very well last year, I think from being the man, he takes obviously a step backwards because the ball is going to be spread around. But do I think his numbers are better than last year? I think he probably ends up around the same, only because the ball's got to be spread out a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. I think that why altogether it may be a better offense. I mean, it's pretty obvious that there's more mouths to feed in Houston, and I think it's a pretty obvious. I don't think he's getting 14 targets a game anymore, or whatever he was averaging at the height of his career over here in Buffalo. Rocky, I want you to try one more thing, just because I don't want the audio for you to be bad. Did you turn up the mic monitoring on your computer at all, or are you close to it? Are you talking extra loud to try to because you think we don't hear you? Because it's like peaking just a little bit.
Yeah,
It sounds like you're really close.
I'm not really close, but I'm going to be talking loud.
Yeah, so you don't have to, and maybe it'll help because I don't want it to be all peaky, and then I can't lower your voice individually. All right, so then let's get to Tank Dell, Nico Collins. We don't have to go into depth on both of them. We can if we want to. But Rocky, what do you think? Nico Collins, this is a good thing for Nico Collins? Is a bad thing for Nico Collins?
Nico looked really good when he played. My gut says that Tank is a better receiver all around than Nico. So I think if it hurts any of those three, I think Nico could be the one that it hurts the most.
Yeah, I think I would have to agree with you there. Although Nico has had, decent production when he is the wide receiver too. I think Tank came on so well that Nico didn't really receive, wide receiver 1 coverage last year. It was already they already kind of spread it around. Now you throw Diggs into the mix. Now it's going to be even less coverage. But again, that ball is going to be spread around so much. I think if anybody does benefit, you have your 2 big guys on the outside. I think it's going to be your underneath man. And I think if they end up playing Dell out of the slot, I think Dell might have, especially considering his ADP, Dell probably has the best production setup for next year in fantasy football.
That's bold. I don't know. I think I would have to think about it because I think on the surface, what you guys are saying is probably the right answer. But I do worry I wonder how that's going to work when they scheme that offense up. And if they're not going to maybe try to. All right, so if I'm a coach, let's put our coach hats on. If I'm trying to scheme that offense, I'm trying to put Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell on the same side of the field as much as I can, and trying to get Nico on the other side of the field. So, do I know they're going to do that? No, and I would do that because I just think Nico's the one-on-one guy you want. I think he's more physical than the other 2 receivers. He's bigger. And if I put Dell and Diggs on one side of the field, you're going to be leveraged heavily, and then I have Schultz and Collins on the other side. I don't know, but that's just my, probably thinking too deep about it. But if I was at, bird's eye view, it probably does help Tank Dell more, just because he probably is the more talented receiver.
Well, and I think you saw that at the beginning of last year when both Nico and Tank were on the field. Tank was outperforming Nico. Maybe it was the plays they were calling. Maybe it was the structure of the offense. But Nico really came on toward the end after Tank went out.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. All right, so let's go on. Go ahead. Did you have something to add, Mark? Sorry.
No, I was just going to say I want to see them put Nico in motion a lot. I think you got to run Nico across the line of scrimmage, bring him over on the same side as Diggs occasionally, draw that coverage over there and let Dell just beat his man over the middle, have Schultz set up shop 7-10 yards downfield and see what fucking Dell can do just hitting the zipper all day long.
Yeah, no, that could work. Yeah, so let's get to the other side of the coin here. Is travel up to Orchard Park, and Buffalo. I mean, we'll talk about Josh Allen last year, I think. But are there any wide receivers in that wide receiver room right now that you'd feel okay rostering?
Yeah,
Yeah, Rock.
I would feel good with Curtis Samuel. If you look, Curtis Samuel had his best year ever when he was with Washington, when the offensive coach for the Bills was running that offense. And so I just think that, first of all, the story isn't done yet. They're definitely going to draft a receiver, and I think they're probably going to pick up another veteran somewhere, either a trade. In fact, there's already rumors that the Browns might be willing to trade Elijah Moore now that they've got Jerry Jeudy. So I think they're going to pick up another receiver. But Curtis Samuel's intriguing. If you go back a few years, right before his free agency, he looked really good. Tons of touches. I think he was averaging almost 8 receptions a game. Also was running out of the backfield quite a bit. So I would feel good about rostering him as like a wide receiver too.
What about you,
I
Mark?
think you're right. I think you're right. I don't think there is, I don't think the story is finished there. I think Phil probably alluded to it last week that, I mean, now that Diggs is officially gone, I think this offense has to run through James Cook, and this obviously makes James Cook's fantasy outlook look a hell of a lot better. And it was already trending up anyway. But, if I'm Buffalo, nobody in that wide receiver room right now excites me. And if I don't make a strong play to either move up significantly in the draft or go out and get, one of there's a lot of rumor about Ayuk to Pittsburgh. That's not a done deal. You don't go out and you don't get yourself like a T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk to come in and be, the bona fide number one there for the next 5 to 6 years. I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you're Buffalo, and you're essentially admitting that you knew that your window was closing and it's potentially shut at this point.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, Curtis Samuel take, I love it. Our memories are very short. When he was leaving Washington, there was discussion that last year when they were both together about who you like better as a player, DJ Moore or Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel, I think, has all the tools. He went to a cesspool that we call a football team, and it kind of just torpedoed his value. Granted, the guy can't stay healthy, but as a flyer or a late round pick, he's probably going to be a late round pick, but a late round pick, the guy that has a ton of upside. I don't hate Curtis Samuel because we've seen him do it when he's had the touches. They definitely are going to go draft somebody, I think. If not, they're going to make a move to go get a T. Higgins or most likely T. Higgins, I think, if they do make that move. But they're going to bring somebody in the room. So, yeah, I'm waiting to see who that guy is. And that's probably the guy I'm going to want, depending on, T. Higgins. I don't care how high the hype gets. I want in because T. Higgins on that offense with Josh Allen is going to be worth every penny you go. Whatever you got, wherever you draft him, he's probably going to be worth it. So I like that a lot. And James Cook, yeah, break the James Cook button. It's going to be pretty big. I think nothing changes for Allen really. Because I think they are going to get somebody to help him out there, but the usage is just, it's out of this world. He's just going to continue being who he is.
Look, he's got to throw the ball, and he's going to throw the ball. So there's got to be somebody on the receiving end of that. What I will say is if you're in, you're in these best ball leagues, it wouldn't hurt if that wide receiver room remains the way it is going into the season. It wouldn't hurt you to roster some of these guys towards the ends of those drafts because somebody's going to get the points, whether it be Khalil Shakir or Curtis Samuel or whoever the fuck else they have catching balls there. Dalton Kincaid's obviously going to get his just desserts. At this moment, this probably hops Kincaid up a handful of spots ADP wise as well. But I still think that they're going to go out and get somebody.
Well, I think if they don't get somebody, then they're going to be in 2 tight end sets quite a bit. Is Dawson Knox still with the Bills?
I think they actually just re-signed him too. I think they just re-signed him 2 years, right?
So it's very likely that that boots him up quite a bit too if they don't go out there and make a big splash, either by trading for a receiver or picking one in the draft.
Yeah, fair. I'm reading something here that says the Texans are going to let Stephon Diggs be a free agent after this year. They
Yeah, I
agreed the
read that.
final three. They voided the final 3 years on his contract.
I wonder what is up with that. That's
Let's see.
interesting.
And they get the 2 picks.
They're
So I
worried.
guess
Like
they're putting their money down on. So I guess what they have a couple more years with I mean, it kind of makes sense because you're gonna have to pay Stroud in like 2 or 3 years, probably 2 years. You get him off the books, you ensure that he's gonna kind of try to ball out because he's playing for a contract, and you got some young wide receivers you like. I mean, it's a little bit risky. It's pretty ballsy. It could blow up in their face if things go left. Wow, that's pretty
I mean, if you think about it,
crazy.
no team was as active in free agency than the Texans. They signed 14 players in free agency, and that's coming off of a team that overperformed and was in the playoffs. So to me, they're putting all their chips in. They're going to ride
They
this
are.
and see. My fear, though, is that there is a lack of maturity in Diggs. And if he's not getting 14 targets a game, if he's not having the offense run through him, is it possible he can be disruptive? But on any other team, I would worry more. I think the Texans just don't give a shit. I think they'd be just as likely to trade him midseason, be happy that they got 2 picks for nothing, and took a chance. So I support it. I wish the Browns had made this trade.
Have we ever known Diggs to be a disruptor, though? I mean, if anything, I think he handled that situation really well because media was trying to come at him about all this shit, and he just kind of wanted to keep quiet about it.
It's not a disruptor, but he definitely pushed his way out of Minnesota, and I feel like he pushed his way out of Buffalo. So
Yeah, I don't think there's been anything we can point to directly, but there has been a bunch of smoke in both places. We heard it towards the end with Minnesota, like you said. They were like rumblings. And then obviously we heard with the Bills. I think you're going off of what you think that story is, which is, I guess, all we really have. But like I said, I don't know what the story exactly is, and even if it is true, I don't think it's. I don't know. That just reminds me of a guy that's a little too emotional and just
I
gets
think if
caught up
Josh
in
Allen would have
things.
kept his if Josh Allen would have kept his dick in his pants, I think Diggs is still in Buffalo.
Well, I think about probably 70% of NFL players don't do that, and we don't see their wide receivers bitching out and trying to get traded. So,
Now that sounds like speculation.
well, I think this all does. You just speculated about Josh Allen's cock.
No, there's no speculation there. He definitely put it somewhere else.
You don't know that.
I'm gonna ask you guys a question.
Wow.
What
No.
what wide receiver?
Mm-hmm.
To me, we're still a quarterback driven league. Quarterbacks,
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones that get teams to playoffs. They're the ones. Receivers are still, to me, not as important as great quarterbacks. And I would almost make the case may not be as important as great running backs because Diggs, is he going to make Houston appreciably better? Only because if he does, it'll only be because they're stacking 3 good receivers now. So they're playing Cincinnati's game, they're playing Seattle's game, and they added a great running back. I think we make a bigger deal out about adding wide receivers. I don't know. I just don't like Justin Jefferson on his own. Is he enough to get Minnesota to the playoffs?
No,
Not without great quarterback play.
no, and I agree. I agree with the sentiment when it comes to football, but if we're talking fantasy, then yeah, it's obviously something we got to talk about. Yeah, but I do think the free agent wide receiver is overblown a bit. I think it's a lot closer to a finishing piece for a championship team, like a running back is, than it is to the impact the quarterback has. But to be fair, when he went to Buffalo is when Josh Allen became a legitimate quarterback, and they began to threaten, to be contenders. So, it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg thing with those two. But in general, I agree with what you're saying.
And I think Josh Gordon would tell you to go fuck yourself because he made Johnny Manziel's career.
That's stupid. All right. So, is there anybody else in the Buffalo locker room that we think this has any effect on, or we move it on?
Move on.
Move on. All right, and with that, we're moving on. We're moving on to the AFC North, and we're gonna go through and have everybody pick their fantasy football MVP from this division. We'll do a runner up, and we may do a most overvalued. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
All
Or like
right,
an
so
avoid. An avoid.
avoid. All right, so I'll start with Rocky, go to Mark, and then I'll go last because I haven't decided yet. So go for it, Rocky.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with maybe a little bit of a surprise that I'm choosing this guy. He is a guy that I have been really high on for several years. And he is a 6'3", almost 6'4" wide receiver, a little bit over 200 pounds with world-class speed. Shows the ability to catch any ball, run a great route. He can run out of the slot or out of the X, looks great. And what I love about George Pickens is he's got better quarterback play this year, no matter who is quarterback, because he can't have worse. And they got rid of Deontay Johnson, and teams don't get rid of great wide receivers unless they feel like they have a great wide receiver on the field. I think George he's an absolute alpha. He did more last year with less than almost any player out there. Only had 106 targets, but he was able to produce over 1,000 yards on it. I just think he is a stud in waiting. I do think Pittsburgh is going to pick up another receiver, whether they do that in the draft or whether they do that through trade. But I don't think it's going to impact him negatively. I think he only gets better. And this year, I could see him having 80 receptions, maybe 90, 1,200 yards, and a really good touchdown total.
Well, that fits. That's a nice segue into my conversation, which is regarding the AFC North, or as the average football fan says, who? I don't think anybody gives a shit about this division. If you're talking about your MVP only catching 80 balls and 1,200 yards, then there's definitely, you're even agreeing as an AFC North fan that there's not a whole lot in this division to be excited about. It's not your fault. It's the AFC North. It's been a shit division for a very long time. I do like the Pickens pick. I've been a George Pickens fan. I think outside of Garrett Wilson has probably dealt with the most inconsistent quarterback play. Were you raising your hand to say something, or are you trying to get the camera to follow you? Phil?
I think Phil's frozen. There he is.
I was going to say he's frozen, but then the light just came on. Anyway, I think there's a guy in this division that's definitely going to top 80 receptions. He's definitely going to top 1,200 yards, and he's definitely going to score double-digit touchdowns, and that's Jamar Chase. I think Chase had a little bit of a down year last year, Burrow being injured again. I think that duo comes back healthy. I don't like the fact that they're going to move on from T. Higgins, but We've seen Tyler Boyd, do it in the past. I personally like them bringing Moss into the mix. They also just brought a tight end, a little bit more of a reliable tight end than Irv Smith into town. I think Jamar Chase is going to get the lion's share of the targets there. I think Joe Burrow is going to get the ball in the air 40 plus times a game, and that's going to be his guy. And Chase routinely beats defenders. He stays on the field. He's your AFC North MVP.
All right. I like that. I like Chase. I thought about Chase, but I'm going to go with his teammate who we highlighted a week or two ago. I'm going with Zach Moss. I'm going with Zach Moss because he's going to allow a fellow like you or even a fellow like Rocky to go ahead and spend up on those wide receiver slots and get you one of those top-rate tight ends, plug him in as your RB2, and hit the road. I just love the opportunity here. And if you're playing in a redraft league, you're trying to win a championship this year, you got to take some risks. If you don't take risks, you're not going to win. So you wait on that second running back, go grab you the best wide receiver on the board. I love Chase. I think Chase is going to have a big year. I think Zach Moss is going to be a bell cow running back for this team. I don't care if they have another guy in the running back room. I don't care if they go draft somebody in the mid rounds of this draft. If they go grab a running back in the first round, then hey, then I'm wrong. But I think with this offense, Joe Burrow will be back. Will he be the same guy? Maybe. He'll be close to it though. And this offense is going to score. Zach Moss is going to get those touches. And I think for the value, what you're going to be able to do throughout the rest of your roster, I think Zach Moss is going to be the guy that's going to wind up being the most valuable player.
Well, here's what happened. Cincinnati saw what we saw last year. If you weren't a casual football fan, we're getting attacked on socials for hyping up Zach Moss. Those guys are casuals. Zach Moss, in JT's absence in the beginning of the year, due to that holdout, Zach Moss was an absolute goddamn beast. And what did we see when JT came back? It was 50-50 even split until JT got up to speed. And only then was it a Zach Moss injury, which took him out of basically a 50-50 share. And then once again, late in the season, even with a healthy, reliable JT, we still saw Zach Moss taking significant snaps. And Zach Moss was doing a lot with his carries. I love the pick. I love him going to Cincinnati. I think Zach Moss is going to have a tremendous year. And like you said, getting him as your RB2 or possibly even your RB3, like if people are going to pass on him, they're the kind of players that make championship caliber teams in my mind.
Well, I think Zach Moss is definitely an upgrade over Joe Mixon, and people are going to look at me and say I'm crazy. But we've been talking about Joe Mixon over the last couple seasons, who has been incredibly average. The only reason why he's had good fantasy relevance is that it was his usage. So now Cincinnati's got, I think, a better running back, slightly bigger. I think he's every bit as good of a receiver out of the backfield, and I think he's a tougher runner between the tackles. I think they're going to, take a test run and see what they've got with this guy.
I joked last week.
Okay, go for it.
So I joked last week about Joe Mixon and his 2.9 yard per carry average. Joe Mixon's got a 4.1 yard per carry average, which is average. And Zach Moss has a 4.7 lifetime yard per carry average. So, I mean, if you're not reading in between the lines and seeing all of these valued stats, then you are just making casual attacks at, referenced and researched NFL fantasy data.
There. So here's the point. Go get you Jamar Chase in the end of the first round. You go grab you George Pickens in the late fourth or the fifth, and then sweep back in and get Zach Moss before somebody else does right after that. And you got all three of these guys. It's the perfect setup. But truly and honestly, like you said, you have to have a little bit of faith and conviction and wait on that running back or whatever you're going to do and go load up elsewhere and get, find the guy that you think is a value and plug him in. And that's how you win championships. And that's how you get into the playoffs. And all that stuff. So yeah, my MVP. All right, let's move on. Runner up. Who's your runner up, Rocky?
I mean, I think this is an interesting decision for me because I like several of the quarterbacks. I think Lamar, of course, is the obvious one, but I think you're going to have to overdraft Lamar this year. I think people are way, way, way excited about Derrick Henry. I think that people are just excited about Lamar in general. And I think Lamar may actually not be as good this year with Derrick. I think they're going to try to really save the wear and tear on Lamar. They're going to ask him not to run quite as much. So that's an easy one to me. But the one that I'm most interested in is what happens with Jerry Jeudy in Cleveland. I think this is a receiver that you can pick up really late in drafts who hasn't really ever performed but could have wide receiver one potential. And Cleveland believes in him. They just signed him to a long-term deal. I think they're going to force the ball to him. I think they're going to have better quarterback play because they won't have 5 different quarterbacks this year. So my thought is I would take a late round flyer on Jeudy and feel pretty good about it.
Were you really not expecting the camera to follow you? That's fantastic. Caught snacking. If you love training videos and you love hype trains, then yes, Jerry Jeudy's your guy. He looks every bit capable to be what he's been rumored to be in the past. He's not lived up to billing.
No, but he's playing with his idol, playing with his self-proclaimed idol. And he's talking, I mean, he's saying the right things. He looked up to Amari. He wants to prove to Cleveland he's never felt wanted. And more importantly, I can't imagine a better mentor than a guy like Amari.
Yeah, Amari is a very humble dude. I like Amari Cooper. My runner-up, you mentioned him. I was thinking Zay Flowers, but I think the hype train on Zay Flowers is there. I think, Dynasty, it was great if you got him. Weekly lineup leagues, I think you're going to have to stretch to get him, and you're going to be holding your breath to make sure he makes his nut every week, because I think there are going to be some stinkers in there. If you're fortunate enough to get him in best ball, I think he's going to put up some great weeks for you in best ball. That'll keep you relevant. But for me, it's Derrick Henry, because now they've legitimately got a guy that they've counted on 3 guys doing in the past, right? So Lamar Jackson always got his touches, but then there was always split between, Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, and who was the other one, the third one that they had there? And then they always have some journeyman come in too, whether it be Dalvin Cook or, Royce Freeman, whoever the hell else they had in there. And, now they can just kick all that shit to the curb. They got a guy that we've mentioned many times in the past, was underused in college, came in with limited touches in the pros, got to really sit his first season and learn behind, I think it was DeMarco Murray, so he didn't have a whole lot of tread on the tires. So you brought up an interesting point, and that's, wanting to keep the tread off of Lamar's tires. There's not a more perfect situation here than a guy that runs like Derrick Henry that already had that opportunity to not have the tread on the tires. Obviously his usage has gone up tremendously the last few seasons, but this is a guy that's still got a lot of pop left. He's still got a lot of run. That offensive line is nothing to turn your nose up at. And I think if they are going to want to save Lamar's legs, then holy shit, Derrick Henry is going to be a huge benefactor. If he doesn't have to worry about Lamar vulturing all those, inside the 10-yard line, touchdown runs, then you're looking at sky's the limit for Derrick Henry.
Fair. I
think that's a good pick.
I'm not all the way there with you, but I can see it. I can see it happening. I'll just get right into mine, and I think this might be a little bit of a surprise for everybody, considering the other quarterbacks in the division. But
Joe Flacco,
another value based pick. Give me give me Mr. Feel him up. Give me Mr. Deshaun Watson. I think that where you're gonna get, I mean, Deshaun Watson, his value is so in the toilet right now. You know, you got, I think fantasy players, media, everybody is talking about this guy like he's a scrub. And you know, he was uneven last year, but I don't think he was a scrub. I mean, I think we've seen him play some of his best football since he was in a Texans uniform. And I think that it's a make or break year for him as far as the rest of his career. I think they went out and got Jerry Judy. It's going to hurt Nick Chubb not being there. I want to see how they address that running game. I know they brought Deontay Foreman into the fold. But I think that Watson can have a pretty good year. Last year I felt this way about Russell Wilson, and you know, despite the smear job that Sean Payton did to him and trying to get him out of town, he had a pretty damn good year. He was a top 10 quarterback. I think Watson is better right now than Russell was last year. I think he probably has better weapons, and I think that we could see a little bit of a revival for Deshaun Watson. And based on where you're going to get him, it's just like the other stuff that I always preach is, you know, sit on those positions, you know, get him late and stack up the rest of your roster. You come back around. If you could stick Watson in there and have a top 8 quarterback that you got in the 13th round, I think, yeah, maybe not outrightly not the most valuable player, but on your roster and the way you constructed it, he can be. So he's my runner up.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, and I think like Derrick Henry, yeah, it's a no-brainer to me. I agree 100%, but I think that's what everybody's thinking. To me, like Jerry Judy, what intrigues me about him is that you can get him later. Deshaun Watson fits that mold too. And I think more than anything you said, Phil, this is a make or break year for Deshaun. If it does not go well, the Browns will move on. They will cut him if they have to. They will, which is it would be shocking, or they'll trade him for a sixth round or a fifth round pick. This is make or break because they have too many great players in their prime to sit around waiting another year after this for Watson to perform. So I think Watson feels that pressure. My only fear about it is there has never been a quarterback that has had that injury in the NFL. So we're in uncharted territory as to how that heals. It's directly on his throwing shoulder. That stuff scares me. But again, like you said, all of that is, my gosh, you might get him in the last round. You know, it's crazy how low people think of him.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so we'll move on. And what was the last? Mark, you were going to let it happen again. You're a piece of trash.
What are you talking about?
You were going to let the silence build. So what do we want to call this last one? I guess the biggest loser of the division, or guy that will lose you, keep you from the
Most
playoffs. I don't
overrated,
know,
maybe most overrated.
Yeah,
or guy you're
something like that.
avoiding.
I didn't get the fucking
Yeah,
point. They know. They know what we're trying to say.
yeah,
Don't
yeah.
draft
Just
these
don't.
guys too high. Don't get caught with
Yeah,
your, with your dick in the masseuse's hands.
I'll go first. I'll just get mine right out of the way. I think there's going to be a little bit more preseason hype for this guy coming into this year because I think he did show flashes of being at the pedigree of where he was drafted. New quarterback in town. I think people are going to say, hey, maybe this helps. I think Najee Harris is going to be overvalued a little bit. There's like what we were just talking about. You're trying to look for value in certain places, and this is how you build your roster. And I think sometimes people could overthink those things. And I think Najee Harris is one of those guys because, yes, while in theory we could build that up, and I can make the argument for him to be a guy like that that's going to be undervalued based on where he'll finish. I think the truth is we've seen him play for 3 years or 4 years, whatever it is, and we kind of know who he is. And I think we got to stick with that when it comes to a player like him. So avoid Najee Harris. I still think Jalen Warren is loved in that building, and he's a game breaker. And I think he will get his touches, and he will be the guy with the bigger plays.
I don't disagree with it.
Yeah, I'm actually was checking real quick here just to see kind of how it played out last year.
Najee still went for over $1,000. I think it was just over. It was like 1,008 yards or something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he just made it because I remember checking late in the season. It was close.
Yeah.
If he did make it. I don't know if he did.
He came real close, but if you look at I think Jalen was real close too. And I'm looking right now, actually, he had 800 yards. Here's the difference. He still outplayed Najee. Najee had a 4.1 yard average. Oh, by the way, that was better than the year before. So that was an ascending Najee Harris. Jalen had over a 5.3 yard rushing attempts or yards per rush. He's just a more instinctive, more fluid runner. I think when Najee came out, we thought he was going to be the next Derrick Henry, and he hasn't lived up to that. He's been a really good, really solid running back, but I agree with you in that Jalen might not be the better running back in that backfield.
It's a moot point anyway. Le'Veon Bell's coming back, and he's better than ever. You read his Twitter.
Le'Veon,
Fresh legs.
he's fresh. Yeah.
All right. So I guess for my overrated player, stop taking him as the tight end too. Mark Andrews' time is over at the top of the board. There are so many young, dynamic tight ends, including one that he shares the field with, and Isaiah Likely, that I think will demand to be on the field a lot more this season. I don't think Andrews is going to get the same target share that he's had in the past. He's a little bit longer in the tooth. The injuries, I think, have caught up to him. And again, their depth at tight end this year is probably the best it's been in a very, very long time. You have, obviously you have Kelsey, you have Laporta, you have Kincaid, you have a bunch of these younger guys that are going to put a lot of points on the board this year. And I don't think you have to go out there and, watch Kelsey go off the board and say to yourself, oh shit, I better reach a little bit here for Andrews. I don't think you have to. And I have been seeing Laporta go before Andrews, but occasionally you still do see those Andrews truthers that want to reach for him. And I think that's going to be a mistake, especially this year.
All right. So
I love it.
I will give you my fantasy. This is more of a question mark, and I know this is going to be one I'm going to get ripped for quite a bit. And I just want to state it is April 4th. April 4th. So we're going as if we were starting the season today. And right now, if we were starting the season today, there are going to be a hell of a lot of people that way overdraft Joe Burrows. He's coming off a pretty serious injury. Oh, by the way, he's been banged up pretty much his entire career. He really hasn't put together a season, a start to finish, where he was completely healthy. There is a ton of unsurety in the wide receiver room. We know he's got Jamar Chase, but there's a thought that T. Higgins could be gone. And Tyler Boyd is a free agent too. And I think there's going to be people that kick the tire on him. He's got a new running back, which I think helps in the running game, but could hurt in the receiving game. And the Bengals still haven't fixed their offensive line issue, which means he's a game-to-game potential injury again. So I love Joe Burrow. I think if he stays healthy, he's probably top 10. But I think there's a lot of questions, and I think people are going to draft him as if he's a top 5.
I think that's fair. I'm on the same train with you. I think people are just brushing these injuries off as if they're nothing. I mean, these are legitimate injuries he sustained. I mean, we don't know what the hell is wrong with his hand, his wrist, or whatever. I mean, I've never seen. I guess the closest thing I've seen was the Purdy thing in the title game, and he came back and that was cool. But I mean, that was scary to see. The guy couldn't hold the ball. So yeah, do I think modern medicine and science could get him all fixed up? Yeah, I do. But does that mean he's going to hit the ground and be Joe Burrow that went to the Super Bowl to start the season? I don't know. So yeah, I think he very easily could finish in the bottom half of that top 10. And I do think just on namesake alone, he's going to be super drafted. I do want to point out, by the way, to Mark's point, I've been on that Isaiah Likely train for the last 2 years. I've seen the writing on the wall since then, and it's finally time to claim my prize because I think you are correct. I think this is the year where we see it change. I mean, they have to get him off the books for sure, and I think they know they do, and they're going to phase him out this year.
Hey, real quick too, and I know Mark, you were high on this guy last year, but maybe a deeper stash, somebody that you can pick up pretty late in your drafts. I do think that Cincinnati's backup running back, Chase Brown, is something that's unique because Zach Moss is going to be the workhorse, but they're still going to work Chase in. And if there's an injury, I think Chase is a competent back. He had a better than 4 yard average last year, caught pretty well out of the backfield. He wasn't dynamic, but he's a 6 foot, 215 pound running back with 4.4 yard speed. So I think you could do worse than stashing him in your team somewhere.
Yeah. Well, your last stat really pointed it out. He had a top 5 breakaway speed in the NFL last year. And you're talking about that's with the likes of Tyreek Hill, Devin Achane, Raheem Mostert, Chase Brown factored in with those guys. So I think that Chase Brown probably he's a little bit more than a change of pace back. I think he will probably end up winning the third down roles when they're in obvious passing situations. And he's obviously going to work himself into a Zach Moss-like committee that Zach Moss had with JT, I think. So you're not wrong there.
All right. Well, guys, do you have anything else to say about the wonderful, wonderful AFC North?
Go Browns.
Who?
Yeah. You know, it's kind of interesting though, and I know you guys don't care, but it's intriguing for me. The Browns are either going to do a several $100 million renovation to their stadium downtown, which I think
or move out of the city in the middle of the night again.
Well, yeah, they're going to be moving out of downtown Cleveland possibly, but they're going to be building, if they move, a almost $3 billion dome stadium where I went to elementary school, on the property where I went to elementary school. So,
oh, that's great.
Kind of cool. You know, either way, I win.
It is pretty cool. It's just a shame to build a beautiful stadium with so many seats that I'll never see asses.
Oh, wow. Well, before we close the show, I just want to give a quick shout out to our other partner, that's Thrive Sports. Thrive Sports, a great little app. If you like to make some wagers on your sports betting, and for all you new users out there, they offer game time deals. They offer freebies, so you get your Steph Curry point 0.5 3-pointers made. They just give you that layup right there, add it to your ticket. But it's a cool app. It's a cool way to make the games more interesting. You go on there, they have all the info for you. We have the link in our bios. And, man, we love Thrive Sports. I can say, honestly, I've been on there lately more than I've been on Instagram.
I feel like
you guys like Thrive Sports too, huh? Wow.
Like there was a hidden joke there.
You're somewhat of a degenerate. Isn't this where they put the 1-800 number if you have a trouble gambling? Because, yeah, you've been on the app a lot. I would say I'm not a degenerate, and I like the app too. I actually think it's got some great offers, and I think it's one of those that keeps you pretty updated with, new things that they're giving you, points or players. So, I think it's a real great app.
Yeah, I am gambling every week that I spend my time making this dumbass show with you idiots. So yeah, I'm gambling in that way, but I've got my sports gambling quite under control.
I think we just need to hit. Maybe they have to do a better job of diversifying to hit Rocky's money tier. They have to have like cockfighting and midget hunting odds on there, and then maybe you pique the interest.
All right. Well, with that is the show, guys. We thank you for joining Guys on Sports. We hope that you listen to us again. If you need any fantasy advice, like you said, check us out on Chalkboard, and look forward to the season next year where we will be live on our TikToks. That's at GON Podcast. You can find us on all your socials at GON Podcast. And if you're finding this on YouTube, please like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let us know what you think. Don't be afraid to add us to your playlist and share us with your friends. Hey, we want to be in your living room. We love you. Peace.
Peace.